course of a first reading deal and a process of this kind. People weren't certain that it would be possible to get an agreement. And that is why I think today is so important, to make the statement that the Parliament, the European Parliament, with the Council, with the Commission, but the European Parliament commits to proposals in this area, seems to me very important. The tools that we're talking about, the telecommunications data that we are describing, are vital to investigate and detect terrorism and crime. It is essential, in my view, to provide a proportionate and balanced legal basis for the retention of data that would otherwise be erased or anonymised. Variations in data retention practice mean that the ability of investigators and prosecutors to detect and prosecute criminals and terrorists, to stop them causing harm or to catch them after they have caused harm, is dependent on which communications service provider a suspect, a victim or a witness has used, or which member state they were in. It is that variation which gives an open goal to our opponents in criminality that we are trying to close by this directive that I hope that we will adopt today. We have many, many examples. I gave some of them to the Libe Committee in September this year, where communications data has been used to trace the members of terrorist cells, to help identify murderers and free kidnapped victims, and to deal with those who are organising very serious types of criminality. The position of the Council, supported by the Commission, aims to find the compromise between the Parliament and the Council. In particular, the need to balance law enforcement's needs with individuals' right to privacy by including specific rules on data protection. As amended, the directive would oblige Member States to ensure the retention of data for the investigation, detection and prosecution of serious crime only. This was a call that came specifically from the European Parliament, as many have said to us that we had to ensure that this was limited to serious crime at the community level, and we have responded to that point in what is being put forward, and the Council accepted that. On periods of retention, the proposed period in the compromise, 6 to 24 months, represents a compromise between those in the Council who wanted a much longer maximum period, and I have to say, Mr. President, there were also some in the Council who did not believe in principle that we should legislate on this basis at all, and those in the Parliament who would have been happier with a shorter retention period. I believe the compromise will enable law enforcement to obtain the data they need without disproportionately infringing privacy rights. The Presidency took account of concerns expressed by Member States and industry, and by some in the Parliament, about costs, particularly those incurred by storing types of data such as unanswered calls. That is why the list of data in the directive has been restricted, and why unconnected call data is outside the scope altogether. It is also one reason why I supported the commitment given by the Commission and Council to regularly review the effectiveness of the application of the directive, together with the European Parliament, the European Data Protection Supervisor and representatives of industry. This is a fast-moving picture, and it is important that all the institutions work together to keep us up to date on the best way to deal with it. As I mentioned earlier, the Council also took very seriously the concerns expressed in this Parliament about data protection and security. That is why the amendments include articles on data protection, data access and sanctions in the event of data abuse. I agree entirely with the representations made by the Parliament that data must be kept safe and secure and can only be disclosed lawfully to people lawfully entitled to see it. It is not an overall access to this. Now, Mr. President, I know this has been a difficult negotiation and the subject matter is technical and complex, but that is why I welcome the requirement that the Commission will fully evaluate the application of the directive and its impact on industry and consumers. Our right to privacy, our right to property, our right to free speech and our right to life are all threatened by terrorists and criminals. I believe that, particularly in the democracy which we are, politicians, democratic politicians, have a duty and responsibility to protect those rights for citizens by the kinds of practical measures that we are agreeing here. I hope at the end of this debate we can say we have achieved that. I believe the Commission's proposal, as amended by the Council and with the support of the Parliament, would secure an instrument which strikes a better balance between the need to retain data for purposes that serve to protect our citizens and the need to protect and respect individuals' privacy. We are embracing new technologies that offer great opportunities for learning, for doing business, for communicating. But those same technologies can be used and misused by those who do not respect the rights of others, and it's used by their victims too. That's why it's right that we do all we can to deliver justice and to protect citizens. That's what they, our electors, demand of us, and it's why we must act, of course proportionately, of course democratically, but hopefully with unity. I am pleased that tomorrow the Parliament as a whole has its chance to express its view on the draft directive. The Commission, in Franco's excellent contribution, has already indicated its support. The Council gives its support. If you, the Parliament, too give support, we can celebrate a historic achievement which will send a powerful message to all European Union citizens about both our determination and our ability to combat terrorism and serious crime, and the importance of the European Parliament in that fight. I believe the message that would send would be important in its own right, but it will also be important for the future arrangements within the European Union as to how we develop these questions in a positive and constructive way. I conclude, Mr. President, by again thanking all my colleagues in the Parliament, many of whom are in the session now, for the very friendly, positive, thoughtful, constructive approach which you have taken in trying to debate these matters. I believe that your wisdom with ourselves can take us to a new frontier of fighting crime, criminality, terrorism for the European Union as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your important statement. Maintenant, je passe la parole à notre...
I'll get the floor now to our rapporteur, who has 5 minutes. Mr. Alvaro.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, Minister, I'm happy for you to be here and to see the colleagues who've been working with me for over 1 year. I have a slightly different view from many of you. I don't think that we ever had the decision before us on the legal basis, because we know that we have the treaties. The Commission made a proposal under Article 95. People might have different views about that. I think we ought to be aware of what we let ourselves into. The Council, as we know from the legal services and from the Council legal services, we know that there is no unanimity in Council, and there was a lot of tactics involved. In terms of content, I think there are common views across the groups. There were some areas of unanimity behind some of the amendments. The final outcome of the vote, 33 to 8 to 5, makes it quite clear what position we've reached. As regard, I have a different view as regards the periods of retention, and I had to bend over backwards. I'm not in favour of an Article X which would extend the period indefinitely, and whether the Commission can investigate whether there are infringements within a period of 6 months. There is also an interesting position in Poland. Nonetheless, we didn't reach agreement on the costs. If the states order something, it's up to the states to pay. We've incorporated provisions for the protection of the populations. These are very positive steps which I welcome, but they cost a lot of money because it comes under national legislation, and that's not an easy thing. As regards the content, I think the Commission had a similar view. If I can quote in English,
clear that the text is divergent from our original proposal in a number